Howdy, howdy, and welcome back to another Workshop Wednesday. This week's edition is all about planning events in GA4. We're going to give you some strategies for how you can think through that. Before we go too far into this, welcome if this is your first Workshop Wednesday. My name is Chris Mercer. Everybody calls me Mercer. You should as well. I'm the co-founder here at measurementmarketing.io, also one of the lead instructors. And whether you found us through our podcast and talks, maybe through some of the other platforms you might have seen some of our content shared with, maybe you're already a member over at measurementmarketing.io, hopefully a part of the Measurement Marketing Academy. We do have a free membership level all the way up through Academy for Marketers, Academy for Professionals, or Academy for Agencies and Teams. However you have found us, we are happy that you are here. When it comes to these workshops, just focus on one new thing and one new idea, especially with what we're about to go through when it comes to these strategy sessions and sort of thinking through things. Because remember, it is overwhelming. It can be a little frustrating to use these tools because there's so many different things specifically about GA4 that can just make it harder to use. So when you are watching these workshops, practice one new thing. Maybe it's something in a different way. Maybe it's a different tool that you see me sort of demonstrate here. Practice that skill, come back, rewatch this workshop, and you'll pick up another new one thing. Planning events in GA4. All right, let's talk about the whys, the hows. We're going to go ahead and dive right in first with the framework. This is especially important to understand how the framework fits into even what is essentially a strategy session around GA4 events. We are all marketing in the blind. We're trying to get to a point where we reliably grow revenue and profits by the activities we go through. Of course, we want to plan, build, and launch. So we think about the questions we're trying to get answers to. Then, and this is where today's workshop comes in, we have to gather the information in the way that is necessary so that we can answer those questions, so we can take the actions that we want to take based upon the answers we get. So focus today all about information. That's where it's going to help you. Now, again, even if you're not the implementer of your team, you still need to understand how these go together to make sure that your implementers are actually measuring your events in this way. Because I would practically bet money at this moment, unless they've taken one of these trainings before, they are not measuring them correctly. You'll see what I mean in just a moment. Then, of course, you get into the build. You make sure the results are being measured. We're going to talk a little bit about that today as well. You make sure your traffic is identified. That is something just called UTM codes, very easy to do. Then you make sure you understand how to use the tool and connect the dots between traffic and results, and that's what will tell you a story of what's working and what's not. Then we listen for the conversation that's happening between the users and the website, make sure it's the conversation that we want them to have. In other words, does it match our forecast of how things should be working? And then we optimize because we're going to see where we're hitting the mark and where we're not. And that is the measurement marketing framework in a nutshell. Easy for me to say. But again, today, focus on the information and a little bit on the results. That's where the skills are going to come into this particular workshop. So let's dive in and we're going to take a look first, again, Lucidchart, because we want to think about strategy. That's what this one is all about strategy today. So a basic event breakdown as it pertains to GA4. When you think about events, there are really three main parts, I think, for me. First is what happened. Then there are details about what happened. And then there's the, how do we know it happened? Like, in other words, when do we get told that it happened? How do we know that it's time to say that this thing happened, right? And we'll get more into examples as we go through. So the what, in this case, these are just behaviors. That's how I think about them, right? So the what is just a behavior. So that's all it is. The what is the actual event name is what you're going to see it called in GA4, the event name. But the event name is really just a behavior of what happened. In this case, like a page was loaded, a page view. Okay, great. When do we know that happened? Like, how would we know that happened? Well, the trigger, if using Google Tag Manager, might be the page config script or whatever the event is that you're firing. And when that trigger happens, this behavior now is recorded. A page view occurs. When the page loads, a page view occurs. If you're just using Google Tag script, whenever that script loads, this happens, right? So that's sort of a what the basic event is, which is just the behavior we're recording. And then when do we know to do that, right? Under those certain conditions do we record that behavior? Then there are the details. And this is kind of the beauty of GA4 in this event model, is you can have all these different details that sort of essentially get packaged with this event. So they come in and they're all there to describe and say, hey, I also, am bringing this little bit of information and this little bit of information. So I know I'm kind of messing up with these lines here. I'm going to delete some of these out because you get the idea, I think, of how this works. So I'll figure out a nicer way to draw this out. But essentially what happens is all these different details, again, are connected, right? They sort of have this package that they all get connected together. And so what's happening is you have in this system with GA4, the way that it works, you have all these different details that describe a behavior that is put into the platform whenever you tell it to be put in. So in this case, when a page is loaded, put in that the fact a page view behavior occurred, and then also package and tell me the title of the page, tell me the URL of the page, tell me what the traffic source was, what the type of traffic was. And you can do up to 25 different details for every event, which is pretty cool. And when it comes to GA4, at least for the web data streams, you can have unlimited number of events, which means you can have all sorts of behaviors that you can describe, right? So that's essentially it, right? A GA4 event is a behavior and its details around those behaviors that get packaged together, and all of this gets pushed into the data stream, and that's what builds all your reports. But I don't think that when it comes to event planning that this is okay to use, but I don't think it's all that useful. And here's what I mean by that. Like, we have a tool ourselves. I'll show it to you in the toolbox, because if you're watching this, you can at least create a free membership of the Academy. And this is the toolbox membership, which will get you into this part, the toolbox. You won't see the rest of these lit up, but you will see the toolbox. In the toolbox, one of the tools, these are ones you would have access to, one of them is the customer journey. And if you're an Academy member for Academy for Marketers, for professionals, or for Academy and teams, you also have access to this, right? So you click on the Academy, the customer journey. In there, this is where we talk about measurement planning and tools for measurement planning. So there's the KIA process and things like that. Again, if you don't know what that is yet, that's okay. Just go through some of those measurement planning trainings and you'll see that. But there is an event planner here for GA4 where we put in, okay, what's the step? In other words, what's the customer journey stage or step that I'm measuring for, and then what's the URL, and then we put in, like, here's a description of the certain behavior I'm trying to measure. Here's what the event name's going to be. It's going to be a page view or a generate lead or whatever. And then here are the different parameters I'm going to want. And we sort of gave this rough guide, number of events up to 25 parameters, which is a ton of parameters. It is more than you're going to need, I think, in most cases. And you really should be trying to max these things out. Let's make that a problem to solve, that you just add a parameters. You have so many. But take advantage of that. That is the mistake that people are making with GA4, I think us included right now. We're not maxing out what this platform can do because we're just thinking about our events like, oh, what's the behavior and what are the details of that behavior? So here's what we're moving into. And this is sort of the cutting edge thinking that I wanted to make sure we were putting out there as fast as we were making the decision that we're going to do it, because this is starting to work and make things a little bit easier. So what we're going to do, so I'm going to zoom out a little bit. We're going to think about this slightly differently, and we're going to think about it in the way that Google Analytics 4 as a platform really wants us to think about it. So I'm going to just pull these up here. Let's just put these up here, get the little line out of the middle. All right. So how do we think about this? We have this automatic, we have recommended, we have custom. I'm going to very quickly describe those, and we're going to search through those. Let me go ahead and pull those up here. All right, so switch over. Okay, so we should have the automatic events first. So I'm putting in measure.tips / GA4 auto. Just sort of takes us to this. You can also just Google for this. These are the automatically collected events. In other words, this is what Google Analytics 4 as a platform can do on its own. It doesn't mean that you're going to always want to do that. Maybe you use Tag Manager to enhance some of these. For example, if I'm going to Control F and look for click. We're going to go through click a couple times. There's click. So click, by default, right, using their definition here, by default, it's anytime they leave the domain, that's when it does a click on its own. So if you want every single click, in other words, clicks that are happening on your site, you're going to have to give that to Tag Manager, right? This is not sort of the training that'll show you how to do that, but you can have it measure every click, not just certain clicks. By default, though, the automatic events, right, these automatically collected events, do collect page views, right? And anything that's web, basically, is what you can do for the web data stream, because that's either app or web. Anything that says app is for an app stream if you're using that. Otherwise, web is what you're looking for. I'm just going to Control F and look for web so we can click through those quickly. So we see there's the click that it automatically collects. We see file downloads that automatically collects. And these are the behaviors. So this file download is the behavior that's going to get recorded in GA4 automatically, right? When, this is the how, a user clicks on a link leading to a file with a comment extension that matches one of these. And here are the different details that will be collected to help describe this event. In other words, it's going to know the link ID, the link class, the link domain, the file extension, so they know what type of file it was, the file name. It'll record all that automatically to help describe this behavior of a file download, right? That's how this is going to work. Other events that are automatically collected: first visit automatically collected, form start, form submit, assuming that you have those listening. And of course, we have things like page view, right? The big one that is all the different pages loading up, and here are the different details. So this is a pretty helpful tool to sort of help understand what GA4 is going to do on its own automatically. And there's a method to this. This is why we're covering this. Again, for those of you who are like, I already know about automatic events, this is important to think about it like this. And there's going to be a reason why. You're going to see that in just a second. So the first thing that I like thinking about is, of these automatic events, in other words, the things that it automatically does on its own, think of these like website behaviors. Because if you think about it, that's all GA4 can actually do on its own, is these generic website-based behaviors that are so generic to every single website that it knows that people are going to click and leave the website. And so it can record that, right? It doesn't know if every site has e-commerce, because not all sites do. It doesn't know if every site can generate a lead, because not all sites do. But every site has these clicks and page views and everything else. So when I think about this, I come into my planner and I think, okay, I need to record the thing that I want to record, right? This behavior. So I'm going to go back up here. We're going to use this behavior thing. So here's my behaviors. I'm going to go ahead and get these ready. So I have these down here. And so when I go into my behavior and I go, okay, what's the automatic way of me measuring for my behavior? So in this case, I might call the behavior the fact that they are, let's just call it generating lead, right? So I got a new lead. This is a new lead behavior that I'm trying to measure for. So this is how I'm planning it out. In other words, I want to measure for a new lead. How do I know that this happened? The trigger is going to be, when they submit a form, right? So when they've got that form submit, I'm going to have that in there. And then what are the different details I'm going to need? So I'm going to need, I want to know certain things around the types of events. I'm going to come to this and we're going to build this stuff together here. So in fact, I'm going to put this trigger down here and say this is when the trigger is going to be on the thank you page. Okay. So we're going to play this thing out here. Okay. When I go to plan out my overall event, right, the thing that I want to actually measure, let me pull this out. I'm going to copy this over. So we're going to put this here. All right. Bear with me as we zoom in and out here. Okay. These events, right, the way I think about this is my event planner. I am literally planning out one event with this. I know it's going to sound crazy, but stick with me. You're going to get it in a second. So this is how we're going to do a new lead event, right? When somebody's a new lead, how are we going to record this? So I have to think about the automatic way that GA4 is going to try to do it on its own. Because what we're going to do is we're going to record this behavior 3 different ways. And this is important with GA4. This is what I think people are missing. They're not only recording it one way. So here's what I mean by that. I want to do a new lead. Well, how's the automatic way I can record it? Well, automatically, we know that page views automatically get recorded. They call them page_view in GA4. So that's what we're going to do. We're like, great, I'm going to record it as a page view. That's my event name. What are some of the details that I'm going to know about when this lead is, in other words, how do I measure that they became a new lead? Well, if I'm just looking at page views, I'm going to have to look at when the thank you page loads, right? So then I'm going to say, well, in this case, I want to have the page location is what it's technically going to be called. And that page location is going to be the / thank you page, whatever .html is, right? So it's like, okay, this page location is a detail of this page view. So when I see page views of this page location, I will know that technically a new lead occurred, because that's what should be happening on page views. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I want to know other stuff like the type of lead and things like that. You could totally add that depending upon your measurement skills. You might need Tag Manager for it, but maybe you're putting in here, I want to know, the type of lead at a certain point. I want to be able to, put in lead type, and maybe you want to put in some custom parameters. You totally can. For now, I'm going to take that out because I want to try to keep it as basic as possible. Just know you can add up to 25 parameters. We're going to practice with just the one, right? Just bits and pieces to understand the concept. So I'm going to continue on just to help flesh this thing out. So I'm already measuring a new lead event by the automatic way that GA4 wants to do it, because I can go pull a report of pages of this specific page location that will essentially tell me how many people have become new leads, right? One way to do that. The next way that I want to measure a new lead is with a recommended event. Now, the recommended event is a business model based event. So what do we mean by business model based event? Well, I'm going to go back into our list. We have automatically collected event. That's generic website based behaviors. Then there's this GA4 reco. So again, measure.tips/GA4 reco. This is going to be for the recommended events. So the way to think about recommended events are these are the events that you can choose from, but GA4 will not do this on its own because it does not know what your business model is. And even if it did, it doesn't know what your tech is. And even if it did, it doesn't matter because your tech is too complicated for it to figure out how to do stuff right now. So you have to set these up on your own if you need them. And that's why it's like, oh, for all properties, you might do this. Like some of us might use virtual currency, but not everybody needs this, right? Only if you have virtual currency will you need that. If you're in online sales, you're going to have more e-commerce oriented behaviors that are being recorded. If you're a game, you might have more game-oriented behaviors that are recorded. These are the business model events. These are what recommended events are. And there's a bunch of these as they come through. In fact, we can go into, let's just say, the one we're going to care about, which is generate lead. So right here, we see generate lead. This is a recommended event. I'm going to click into this. It's going to take me to a different spot. And I actually like this page a lot for this, for what it does, because all the recommended events are here. Now, these are not Google saying you have to use these. This is Google saying if you're trying to measure for a certain behavior that best fits under one of these for your business model, then you should do it. So in this case, we want to measure for new leads. We're going to use generate lead because we're going to do that whenever anybody has, generated a lead from a re-engagement campaign. That's fine. We're going to use this, generate lead. So now we know generate lead events. We also know that it's got a couple parameters. It wants currency, it wants value. And what this basically means is if you're going to use one, you have to use the other, or you either use both or none. And of course, you can always add on custom parameters if you needed to later. You can add on these other things, right? We're not going to keep rehashing that. But I'm going to put this in as generate lead. And we're going to go back. So now we've planned out the automatic way of how we're measuring an event. And chances are, because this is automatic, this is something that automatically happens. Like in this case, it's whenever, a page gets loaded, technically this trigger technically happens on every page load, right? So every time a page loads, the script fires and it captures the page view, which captures the page location. Only pages with this page location will I consider new leads. Then there's, okay, well, I want to use this generate lead event. This is the business model, a recommended event way of me describing this, right? Maybe I put in a lead type. I want to do a little custom parameter. I can put in page location, but other stuff, right? But whatever you're putting in there, you custom parameter, and I'm saying this is called a checklist, right? Because they were getting some checklist from us. There's our checklist lead. And then the trigger is going to be changing, right? Because again, this might be tag manager or something else that you're using, but the trigger could be when the thank you page gets loaded. It could be a little more complicated. And you say, when they arrive at the thank you page after being on opt-in page, right? Something like that. Like it's more of a path because you're getting a little bit more specific based upon the tools. And you sort of put this in. You don't even have to know how to do this as a strategist. Just think it through. And then your measurement professional will help you determine this and speak it into whatever the tool is. But essentially, to recap so far, I've measured this new lead two different ways. First is the automatic way that GA4 is doing on its own, hopefully already. So I've got that, and I know how I'm going to pull up how to get an answer to how many new leads based on the automatic way of it being measured. Then what's the recommended? In other words, for my business model, is there an event, a behavior that also describes new lead through a business model method? Yes, there is. Generate lead, cool. I'm also going to maybe add some custom parameters or don't, whatever. And my trigger might get a little more specific for when this particular event fires. So yes, the page view will fire and the generate lead will have fired when I have my new lead event occurs, right? In this case, these behaviors, because a page load would have already occurred here too. Then there's this third way, which is custom events. Now, custom events you can certainly Google for, but spoiler alert, custom events are whatever you want them to be. And I think, again, this is where 80% of your GA4 setup should be custom events, and this is where you're missing the boat. You and me both, to be honest, because I think we're missing the boat. We definitely do more than the average person does, for sure, but I still think we have to just flood our properties with more custom events. So the custom events, and I want to make this white text here so you can really stand out, so you can see what we're talking about. The custom events are brand-specific events, meaning this automatic event should make sense to me no matter what, because it's a website behavior. So you know what my page views mean. I know what your page views mean. This generate lead, you and I probably will be able to figure out because it's a business model thing. And if I have a business model that generates leads, you will have a business model that generates leads, right? So far, so good, but we're speaking at the same business model. If I don't have that same business model as you do, then I may not need this event, right? But then there's the custom. This is the brand specific. In other words, how does your brand reference this behavior? Well, for us, our primary method is sort of becoming a new lead is a toolbox member. So we literally put this in. This is what our events actually do look like. We call it a toolbox complete. And again, at that point, we might say, we put in member type, right, as a parameter or something like that, because now they're starting a membership. So now they are members, and we say they're a member, and then we call them toolbox, right? So something like that we might put through, just to give you an example of what a parameter that helps describe this specific behavior. And then when, right? So the trigger that we might do for this is, again, it could be when they arrive on the thank you page after arriving on the opt-in page. Same trigger, right? Especially if we're in Tag Manager world, same trigger could fire both of these events. You might say fire a generate lead event and fire a toolbox complete event. When they come through. So there's not one way to do this. I want to emphasize that. That's kind of the best and worst part about measurement. There's always multiple ways. But what we're doing is we're rinsing and repeating this process. It's just sort of 3 steps. How do we measure? First, we think about what the event, what the behavior is that we want to record. So in this case, it's how do we determine what a new lead is? Okay, well, first we think about how the automatic way of that event is being recorded in GA4, so I can answer the question through the automatic method. It's kind of brute force. It's very generic. It's very general information, but useful, and you got to think about it. So how are we recording this event in the automatic way? They won't always be page views. Sometimes it'll be a click or something like that. Then there's, okay, how do we do it the business model way? In other words, we're using a recommended events. So certain things, for example, for a purchase. You record a purchase when the receipt page loads. That's the automatic way of doing it, because a page view of a receipt page should imply a purchase or transactions occurred. But the actual recommended event would be called purchase. That's what GA4 wants you to call it, purchase. And you would put in the types of products being purchased as your products. And you would obviously, maybe you fire that through the data layer if you're using Tag Manager, or through an integration with Shopify if you're using their Shopify for a purchase event, whatever it is. And then there's the custom specific. What do you call it when somebody becomes a customer? You might be first-time customer or recurring customer, repeat customer, you might call them. You might call them rabid fans, or that they joined your rapid speedy club or whatever. The things that don't make sense to me. Like you could come into my GA4, you could see this toolbox complete and have no clue what we're talking about. That's okay. You don't need to read my GA4 from a brand specific level, right? I'm not building my Google Analytics 4 so that you can use it. I'm building it so that we can use it. And that's the trick to this platform. You have to really, really own it. So go into your GA4 and go through those events that you're currently recording. And when you get in there, go in there and look at the different types of events that you have. See how many are the automatic events that GA4 is doing on its own. If that's most of them or all of them, you are absolutely missing out because you don't have the recommended, the business model events. So then you look at your business model, go look in those recommended events list and say, okay, which one of those should we now be implementing to record the same behavior, just a slightly different way through a different viewpoint? And then think about it from your brand specific. What do you call it when somebody becomes a new lead, right? Do you call it, somebody who is a checklist invitee or checklist user, something like that? If that's how you internally refer to them, record that event that they just became that, or they, when they become somebody who's added to cart, or they became a club member, right? Put them in there, put membership level in there, customize that, say became a member, and what type of member do they become? Think about all the different custom events that describe what's going on in your brand. The more of these custom events, and again, I'm not saying either or, it's all 3. How do we describe the overall behavior we're trying to get through the automatic way, through the recommended way, and then finally through the custom way? Doing it all 3 ways is necessary, because some reports it's going to be easier to get it through the automatic way. Some reports will be easier to get it through the custom way, and some reports, obviously, the business model way. It's kind of the beauty of this system. You get the information in there 3 different ways: the automatic way, the recommended way, and the custom way. In other words, how your brand references that behavior. And when you do that, and you keep doing that, and you keep doing this pattern of the main behavior event along with the details that are describing whatever I need for that event, This is the information we're collecting to get answers to all these different questions. And now you will be able to build reports a lot faster and a lot easier because you're going to have the information collected 3 different ways so you can access it through 3 different ways. That's so important to be able to do that in GA4. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and end it here before we get a little bit too long-winded. Hopefully you found at least one new thing in thinking through this. I'll tell you, if you already knew about events and parameters and that wasn't so revelating for you, or some sort of revelation for you, then I would definitely think about the automatic, and then recommended, and then custom. In other words, you measure it, every behavior you measure 3 times. So every click, you're like, cool, how do I measure a click? I'm gonna measure it for when they click. I'm gonna measure it, that's my click behavior. There are certain clicks that I'm gonna want as a business model click that might be that they are adding to cart, for example. It could be a click that you might wanna record some clicks are gonna be recorded like that. And then other clicks might lead to, hey, this person's sharing on Facebook. So they are somebody who's an ambassador, a brand ambassador maybe, and you make a custom event. Hey, they're now out there sharing the word, There's some really cool things you can do. Either way, if you found at least one new thing, watch this one again after you practice it, and you'll get another new one thing after that. With that, if you like workshops like this, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. We always like to have you back there with that. And remember how it fits into the framework. It's all about this information and the results being measured, because all those custom events we can turn into ACE conversion events, right? We call them ACE results. We stands for when somebody's aware of the journey, when they complete the journey, when they engage along the way. We've got lots of videos on ACE already. But this is where it starts coming in. And when you're thinking about you're planning your events, when you're thinking about that, how you get the information in. This is garbage in, garbage out. If you just throw stuff in GA4, it's highly unlikely you're ever going to get it back usefully. But if you're putting it in GA4 3 different ways, you are more than likely going to be able to use one of those ways to pull it back out, no matter what question that you are asking. All right. With that, we did talk about the Measurement Marketing Academy Toolbox. It is our free membership over the Academy. So if you want that, you are more than welcome to it. And of course, if you are ready, you can unlock all the courses and the workshops, the Ask Instructor support, and everything else that's back there as well through whatever level makes sense for you, whether it's the free Toolbox level, the Academy for Marketers, Academy for Professionals, or Academy for Agencies and Team. You can find out more over at measure.tips/Get Academy. With that, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up. This has been Planning Events in GA4. Thanks again for watching this workshop, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.